And AI will allow that to be much quicker and much better and handle greater volumes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Leena AI Podcast. Our latest edition features Brian Stewart, the CIO at Simon Fraser University. Thank you so much for taking your time and joining us, Brian. I'd love to quickly have you start off by providing a quick overview of your role at the organization and a day-to-day peek into what you do for our audience to understand your role better.
Hi, thanks for having me. In terms of the role I have, I'm CIO, and anyone who's a CIO will immediately know what the role is. It's running around trying to keep all the IT working in a safe, secure, and sustainable manner. So that includes all the architecture, all the infrastructure, all the enterprise apps, all the client services, all the projects. So standard CIO work that we do. Obviously, it's slightly different because you're working in a educational environment, and you're looking at teaching as opposed to producing products or other services. So that tends to be the focus that we have. It's a very heterogeneous workload that I have in terms of, because you're supporting so many different. You're supporting the administration side, you're supporting the teaching side, and you're supporting the research side. So there's three sort of pillars that you have to support, and that requires a significant amount of diversity and intensity to be able to support that. I've been in the post-secondary sector for about 20 years now. Before that, I was in the printing sector, and I moved over. So there's a lot of learning in printing that I could get. One of the key learnings that I had was in digital transformation. For those who went through the desktop revolution, they would have known how it totally changed the printing industry. And to some extent, that's happening now in other industries as we move down the AI path and we use data-driven, affordances. So I can see a lot of the learning I had in that change management as being applicable in terms of moving forward within the post-secondary. But I did gain a lot of information on that, and it is a difficult challenge, particularly in a tradition-based institution. But that essentially is the role that I have, just to give you some idea of what my day looks like.
Lovely, Brian. Great to know about that. So quickly diving into what's happening and what's so exciting in the world today, and that's generative AI, right? So what, according to you, is going to be the impact of generative AI on education? And that could be across the three things that you said, right? Administrative, student and learning outcomes or research, and teachers. Like what do you think, and what all impact can you have? And if you have some specific examples, that will be great for the audience as well.
In essence, an awful lot of the AI continues on the theme generated by learning analytics and analytics in general, or academic analytics. It basically is similar. It's along that continuum. AI does an awful lot of what we were doing manually in that space, and those are activities that have been working for a decade, to be quite honest. I mean, I remember attending an EDUCAUSE survey seminar by Purdue, and they were talking about their traffic light system, how they were, looking at students at risk, and how they did interventions to be able to support that. And that must be a decade old or close to a decade old by now. And AI will allow that to be much quicker and much better and handle greater volumes. So from that perspective, we're on a continuum. So it's not necessarily new. Having said that, there is new things that AI does, but it's not like, wow, all of a sudden there's a new mountain and all new stuff. It's like, no, this is continuation. Many of the things that I'm sure people have either seen or heard of in terms of the support. One of the big things is personalized learning, and this relates to adaptive learning as well. And this has been talked about for 2-3 decades. It is possible with AI. I'm not sure how much teachers and educators will grab onto that. It's unproven as to the effectiveness of adaptive learning. Nonetheless, a more personalized approach will help significantly with improving outcomes, and for that, AI can help that in terms of providing information and assists and prompts to teachers and to teaching assistants. So there is definitely something in that space. research will have to be undertaken, tests will have to be undertaken to validate that. Most of what I'm seeing initially is around the student journey, is around basically the tail ends of the student journey. You're talking about student, being aware of your institution, selecting your institution, being admitted to your institution, and then students in the alumni space in terms of donorships and continuing engagement with the institution. So it tends to be the tail ends that people are using this. One of the areas that I think it was either Georgia State or Georgia Tech have used is around summer melt. And summer melt is when students take, they submit to an institution, they get accepted, but then don't join. So between, let's say, the March, April field and the September, they disappear. And what they've done is they've used AI to try and identify what the key parameters are for there, and then try and deal with that to avoid the summer melt. And to my understanding is, and they've been doing this for a number of years. This is not just today. They've been doing this for about the last 5 years. I think they've had some success in that space in terms of moving it forward, and in terms of reducing the summer melt. Other areas that I think it was Maryville University. This is from EAB, who's a company. They say that Maryville University is using SIA to review transcripts. So, in other words, to make sure that students are ready for graduation, this is almost it's robotic process automation. Essentially, it's just checking and validating, so they can do that. Very repetitive task, very rule-based task, perfect for a thing like ORPA.
Yeah.
The South Carolina, we're looking at annual giving, and they customize messages using AI, using ChatGPT. So, and that improved giving because it allowed the message to be more relevant. It wasn't a "Hi, how are you?" It was like, "How are you, Joe? And we know you, and here's some details." And that increased. So those are two areas that I can bring to mind that it is. In terms of the teaching, that's going to be one of the hardest ones to do, to be quite honest. So I would anticipate what we'll see is in the administrative field, in the transaction field, that we will see AI definitely grow quickly in those areas. The other thing, and we'll talk about this later in terms of privacy, is there's less privacy information in that area. It's much more transactional information, less harmful, less subject to privacy restrictions. So that again gives us an ability to play more openly in that space without incurring potential privacy issues.
That makes a lot of sense, Brian. And I have a couple of follow-up questions. So you talked about the summer melt and how a few organizations have already put in some systems and AI and predictive analysis systems to kind of predict a student's behavior of probably attriting before joining the university, right? So like, can you talk a bit more about that? Like, if you know more, like what are the different kinds of parameters that they're trying to study, or like are they using the students' engagement with their applications? Like, how do they kind of do that? What data are they looking at? I'm just curious.
So to be quite honest, I'm not that aware of exactly. Like I know the overall concept, but I wasn't involved in the project to know exactly what data sets. If I can sort of looking from the outside, in terms of what would be known, would be trying to assess in terms of the rank choice that they would have, what their grade average would be, what their K-12 institution would be, did they apply for multiple programs, and so forth. So you'd look at these are the normal things that you would ask for a student in terms of it. Also, as you said, did they engage? Did they come on campus to do a campus tour? Have they engaged consistently? Are their parents? The parents are a key driver in all this. In terms of K-12 students, are the parents engaged? How much have they been? So I don't know the data sets they're looking. Those would be the ones that I would anticipate they were looking at, and they would be able to look at those that came against those that didn't, and then develop the parameters from that in terms of these are key drivers for success in those areas. That would be my anticipation.
That makes a lot of sense, Brian. So you also mentioned that the teaching outcomes changing because of using generative AI. Let's say generative AI changing and helping teachers provide better teaching outcomes and the learning outcomes, for students, is something on the tougher side, as you mentioned earlier, right? So I have a question, and I have a few friends who are in universities, and of course, people who join us from these universities as well, and they say right now there's a tussle between the teachers and the researchers and students, saying that whether you want to use Chat GPT, or whether you want to make use of these open AI large language models, to do homework, not even just in universities, but even in schools, right? I think that's a big discussion. K to 12, that's a big discussion right now. I have a nephew, and one of their teachers does not penalize, the other one does, right? So it's like that at this point, right? What are your thoughts? Where do you stand, and where do you think this will evolve from where we are right now?
In terms of it, like if we look back, it's somewhat similar, though much less in impact. If you look at when students got calculators to do math, and all of a sudden, like, it wasn't about computation; it was about understanding logic and understanding, how math worked in a much more deeper level, and it wasn't about doing sums. The same thing to some extent is that impact is going to be held on teaching in the future. Good writing, is good writing any more a feature if you can get ChatGPT to give you basically the elements? So I think it's going to shift, both in terms of the type of students we're looking for. So I'm expanding your question a bit. So if you look at it right through the K to 12, if you've got agents that can help you do what calculators did for computation, if you have things, then you start asking different questions, and you also start